Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Tool Belt Podcast from Plant Services. I'm Tom Welk, the Chief Editor of Plant Services, and today I'm speaking with Kevin Malici, the Executive VP of Marketing and Technology for Carita America. Carita America is a global leader in water solutions and is one of the world's largest suppliers of water treatment equipment. In this conversation, Kevin and I talk about the relationship between water treatment and building harmony, and why the effort to manage and protect water resources at the plant level is taking on a new urgency.
I think if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data by industry, and you look at, what percentage of the workforce is in those different age groups by different verticals or industries, it's a scary picture because there's so many people that are, going to be retiring. And, it's a huge deal. The more customers I've talked to over the last couple of years about that topic, it's on everybody's radar. So the fact that you're so attuned to that with your customers, I couldn't agree more. How do we make a operator, instead of having them, get 3, 5, 10 years of experience under their belts in managing some of the water-related systems, to be that really, well-seasoned, highly respected operator? How do we get when he or she retires, how do we get their replacement to be perhaps not instantaneously as effective, but certainly we close the time gap? Because we don't have, assuming we find the person, we don't have 3, 5, 10 years to do that anymore. So, that's a great aspect of our business is helping to close and shift the paradigm of that learning curve so that we can make people much more knowledgeable and able to act upon their own sooner through the kinds of products and services that we're involved with.
That kind of keys into the first question we had on our list, which was what kinds of contact does Carita America have with customers like the plant services audience? Is it an advisory capacity? Where you introduce new technologies to these teams? Is it the kind of thing where Carita America can work with them to find out how to integrate the various siloed data sets, for example, that are on their plant and help them drive reliability higher?
Yeah, well, I think we match up very well with your customer profile. So at the plant level, our main, and we have a very robust approach to the relationships and the contacts that we build at the plant level. So it ranges everything from, as you might suspect, plant management, the plant manager, senior most operational roles, operations management, environmental health and safety, sustainability functions. I mentioned operations. So probably maintenance services. So probably the typical ones that you're accustomed to. And to complement that, we do the same kind of thing at the corporate level, where we're talking to a corporation that has multiple plants in their fleet. Those same kinds of functions replicated at the headquarters level, if you will, and we try and manage our benefits that we provide in an interaction between both those groups. The interesting thing that's happening there is, with all the issues in the world regarding, well, first of all, at the high level, we have a regulatory environment that is definitely getting tougher. I know there's been a lot of talk in the political environment that, we're eliminating all these regulations and that sort of thing. I don't really see that happening in practice in the water space. If anything, I see it going the opposite direction, because a lot of times it's also heavily influenced at the state level, right? So we have an increasing regulatory challenges in the acquisition, use, and discharge of water. which isn't getting any easier, and we can talk about some specific examples of that. We have the whole sustainability issue and problems with water scarcity all over North America and the world. You know, to that, as you lead the landscape, I'm sure, over the last decade or so, water is not going to be don't think about it, it's a given kind of resource that it once was. It's now it is in certain parts of the world and in this country and the world, a precious commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And the availability, the cost of acquiring it, and the quality of it are really shifting. So the reason I raise those issues is that as we talk with those functional managers that we're discussing, the whole attitude, attention to, inquisitiveness about the technical curiosity of our customers and prospective customers is a pretty steep upward swinging curve. I mean, it was always strong from a kind of a operational point of view, and protecting, ensuring asset integrity over time, and heat exchange efficiency, for example. But now it's got a whole new twist, and that twist is it's getting the attention it deserves because of all the drivers that are out there. We just happen to talk about two of them.
You know, it's really interesting you mentioned the issue of water quality and freshwater availability. I don't mention this very often because I think people would find it strange, but I waited to start a family until I resettled back here in Chicago, where we are next to Lake Michigan, and that issue of water is not going to be the same issue as it is elsewhere in this country. It mattered a great deal to me to give those kids a head start in a place where that was one less concern, and I do believe that concern is going to grow over the next 30, 40, 50 years.
Oh, no doubt about it. And that kind of thinking, not just in society in general, on a human basis, but it translates to, for businesses like ours, we're very focused on corporate social responsibility. And that whole issue really plays into our equation. You've heard a lot about purposeful branding. That people, not only in their personal lives, but increasingly in the B2B environment, buy from companies because of what they do and what their philosophy is towards certain societal issues, right? So 30-some years ago, the leadership of Kurita Water Industries in Japan formulated the following company philosophy. You may have seen it in some of the background materials John shared with you. And that philosophy is a really simple sentence. It says study the properties of water, master them, and we will create an environment in which man and nature are in harmony. So I've been in this business a long time, and I saw those words for the first time about 2 years ago, and it really inspired me. I mean, that is our mission. And we're finding that in those discussions with our customers and prospective customers, there's an increasing sensitivity to, respect for, and I mentioned before the word curiosity, about how does that translate to my plant or my company or my unit operation, whether it's wastewater, generating steam, what have you. So.
No, I agree. That's very inspiring. It reminds me of a plant that's here in Chicago that I worked at for a while. It was an OEM that took great pride in, number one, developing a headquarters building that achieved LEED Silver certification. And also, they took various manufacturing facilities of theirs and drove them down first to zero hazardous waste and then to zero waste. And water was a big part of that story. That was my next question. Was when you do come into contact with these plants, this is an aspect of daily plant life that we should explore more. Do you see the maintenance and reliability teams working on these missions to improve sustainability and go towards these sort of zero waste facilities. Yeah.
No doubt about it. And not just maintenance and reliability teams, but there's all kinds of functional areas. Again, the title sustainability hasn't been around that long, right?
Right.
And now you're seeing it not only at the corporate level, but at the plant level, and it's been even labeled, assigned to other functions as you go down the organizational chain. And that sustainability word is there. So yeah, there's tremendous emphasis on that. Probably still scratching the surface of what it will ultimately be in terms of absolute terms, but from a relative and a trend point of view, unquestionable.
Okay. Well, let me ask the question about digital technologies for energy management and reliability. That seems to be where our conversation is going. Where on the spectrum would you say that the utilities that you work with, the water, wastewater treatment utilities, where are they positioned? Are the utilities early adopters, fast followers, or somewhere in between?
I think it's my answer would be those are the two bookends, and there is the whole spectrum in between.
Okay.
So I don't think it would be fair or accurate to say that the utilities, in aggregate, are on either one of those ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
And it's a blend. It's driven by the company, driven by their leadership, driven by the nature of what they do. So, for example, if they're already in an IoT space themselves, the likelihood that they're going to have a IoT and a digital orientation, in my experience, is probably higher than if it's not. It's just so much around us and so much part of the fabric of our world today that, it's really tough to deny that digitization and doing things digitally, measurement and analytics and cloud-based activities and wireless communications, and it all boils down to getting the right information into the hands of the right people in a form they want it, when they want it, and that they can act upon. That's a lot of words there. There's 4 or 5 elements to that, but I mean, it's not a replacement for people. To me, digitization is a fantastic opportunity to enable the untapped greatness that all these professionals that operate plants have, and sometimes they don't have the bandwidth to focus on it because they're doing other more conventional things. So I always think of it as that digitization and IoT are not a replacement for, but the opportunity to liberate the intellect that people have, and give them the freedom to think at much higher levels to do things, because some of the other more routine and tactical things are being helped through digitization.
Well, and you mentioned earlier the issue of increasingly stringent regulations. They will likely not be getting any less stringent regardless of the administration in the U.S. These digital technologies, we have found, give plant teams peace of mind, because once you do get the system in place and the technologies in place, the data collection and storage and compliance is all automated. It's one, as you say, it's one less thing to think about.
The sensory technology is just evolving at a rapid pace. The world of digital sensing is upon us. Which basically means that there's a lot of information stored in that sensor itself. When's the last time it was replaced? Is it performing to specification? Is it likely to fail? I mean, there's all kinds of intelligence just at the point of measurement. A good example of that, of how that comes into practice, is one of the regulations that definitely increasing in its emphasis is the discharge of phosphate-containing additives into some receiving body of water. So phosphate-bearing chemistries are kind of the historical, recent history mainstay of corrosion control and scale control in cooling water systems, right? Well, the problem with phosphate when it gets into the river or the lake or the ocean or all three is that it's a nutrient. It's going to, so it happens somewhere in the upper Midwest. It ultimately finds its way down the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico. It's a nutrient. It is a engine in the creation of unhealthy algal blooms. You heard, toxic algae and that sort of thing. You wind up with a scenario where massive areas of the Gulf of Mexico are dead zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So finding ways to mitigate that regulatory challenge involves not only chemistry changes and introducing the technologies and materials that achieve the same technical performance but do not contain phosphorus.
Mm-hmm.
And then the measurement and control and monitoring of those technologies to make sure that they're performing to the degree they need to. So, it's an interesting web of challenge and opportunity.
It is. I've got a friend in New Orleans who sometimes teases me and says, "Will you please stop dumping stuff in our river?"
Yeah.
And I'm here in Chicago.
Right. Well, there's some truth to that.
There truly
is.
is.
Farmland, and it all drains into the Mississippi Basin, and it's very true.
And there's a multiplier effect, as you were pointing out, at the end point, which a lot of the people upstream never see. They can afford never to see it, but it's still there, so they have to be aware of it.
Out of sight, out of mind. That's why states like Wisconsin, have been very, very stringent on that issue, and they're thinking not only of their own water quality, but they have an attitude of responsibility and respect for all the downstream impacts.
True. Well, we're getting close to time, so let me ask you, if I could, Kevin, a closing question about technologies. When it comes to the technologies that firms like Carita are developing to support the mission of the maintenance, reliability, operations sector, what technologies are you excited about, in possibly including that corrosion technology you were talking about, corrosion detection?
Yeah, so there's a wide gamut that we can answer that question with.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, let me just step back a little bit and say, when I visited our new parent company in Tokyo for the first time last year, I had a chance to visit one of the global technology centers. And there are several of them around the world, in Europe and Singapore and Japan. And it was just an amazing sight. I mean, the level of investment in technology innovation. There's a lot of talk with words like that out there, but I really saw it up close and very personal, the depth and width of that investment, both from an equipment point of view, water treatment equipment, and from a chemistry point of view. So to answer your question more specifically, there are technologies in something, an old traditional topic of steam generation and boiler water, for example. There are technologies that enable us now to replace conventional treatments with multiple treatments with a single treatment that involve, for example, film forming amine technology. The investments in automation and control for different plant operations, such as wastewater, on sensory technologies and control systems that very effectively and efficiently control the dosing of coagulants, for example, to wastewater system and do it in such a way that at the end of the day, the propensity for a system to either to overfeed chemical and waste chemical or underfeed it based upon changing conditions is mitigated.
Mm-hmm.
We have a commercial office called S-Sensing CS that does that. The friendly, greener cooling water technologies, which we've already talked about. And then another one would be, that just comes to mind, would be the topic of water reclamation.
Mm.
So, you take systems such as a cooling tower,
mm-hmm.
and it blows water, bleeds off a certain amount of water continuously to maintain a certain chemistry situation that is manageable from a corrosion and scale point of view. Well, that's a lot of water that often goes right to the wastewater plant and winds up getting discharged.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is integrate solutions that involve not only chemistry, for example, membrane treatment chemicals, along with filtration and membrane equipment like ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, to create these integrated packages or little modules that take cooling tower blowdown, and instead of sending it to the sewer, recondition it, if you will, and it becomes the makeup water back into the cooling system, which reduces a tremendous amount of fresh water consumption.
Right.
Going back to our water scarcity issue, and at the same time, it mitigates both from a volume and a water quality point of view discharge challenges. So water reclamation would be another big one.